whose traditional lands we meet, and we pay our respect to the elders past and present. Today, we're very grateful to have Dr. Gabrielle Weikart. She's a senior lecturer in social and cultural anthropology at the University of Vienna. And today she's going to talk about memory, heritage, and commodification, the many sides of disaster tourism in Indonesia. So this is a hybrid event. Welcome to our colleagues online and also in person here. So for those of you who are online, if you want to raise a question or comment, please write them down on the question and answer session. We will not be able to do a live question today, but please just write your questions in the question and answer box, and we'll read them after the presentation. So without further ado, Gabrielle.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. And most of all, of course, thank you for inviting me to ANU. I'm currently a visiting fellow here at Australian National University, the College for Asia and the Pacific. Unfortunately, only until the end of September. But I'm very glad also having the opportunity here now to meet some of my colleagues at ANU who are interested in Indonesia, who are Indonesians themselves, who have worked there. Something that's what I had to experience is currently not so easy. I mean, to meet colleagues, because I've been for the last 10 days at the college, and I feel sometimes I'm the only person in the whole corridor, only some lonesome students maybe sitting outside. I must admit they're very disciplined and always wear their masks, even if they're the only ones, you know, for several hours, I think. But so as I said, you know, I'm happy to be here now and also to share some of my ideas and experiences in Indonesia. And I look forward and also, of course, to your comments and questions. We've had a bit of a problem at the beginning with the technology, which is normal, I think. And now I'm here just to explain to those who are not in the room, here with 3 computers and screens, and I feel like almost a movie star, but I hope I will manage with everything. And so please forgive me if there are sometimes some slight interruptions. You already heard, and you can see on the screen, of course, too, what the title of my presentation is. And I will talk about some research which I've done between in 2018, 2019 in different parts of Indonesia, 2 areas in Java and 1 in Sumatra. And I did do this research together with 2 students from Gadjah Mada University, Department of Anthropology. So I also would like to thank here my colleagues at Gadjah Mada University, who have been very supportive in this and in other projects I could carry out so far. Good. So, where does it go? You can just navigate on here. No. So, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Do you want me to stay?
I think it's okay. Sure. So how should I do it then? Oh, there. Okay.
With the mouse.
Okay, good. Good. I don't think really I have to introduce to much or to introduce you much into the area. And since you're all familiar with it, so we'll just we'll briefly go over it. And I will be talking about so-called natural disasters. And natural disasters, you probably are aware that Indonesia is very prone to several kinds of disasters. Being in the Ring of Fire, of course, we had earthquakes, we have volcanic eruptions. but also landslides, etc. And so 1 and 2. And here in this picture, just to remind you, to give an idea how many volcanoes Indonesia has, and that really a large number of those volcanoes that exist in the Ring of Fire are located in Indonesia and are active. So it is not surprising, of course, that some of them may cause or do cause problems once in a while. And here on this this slide, yeah, you see just this is only a short compilation of some of the most disastrous or biggest disasters that happened in Indonesia over the last 100 or more than 100, 200 years almost. And I only picked out earthquakes and volcanic eruptions because these are relevant for my talk here. And you can see, of course, the last bigger ones that are mentioned here were in 2018 in Sulawesi, and Anak Krakatau is the volcano. Now, disaster is one area I would talk about, but as I said, it's called disaster tourism. So I'm been interested, of course, also in the touristic aspects. And also this year, brief overview of tourism in Indonesia. And we can see that it is a growing, or it was at least a growing industry in Indonesia, like in many other parts of the world. And I should also, well, I did mention already that my research was carried out before COVID. And also I do not really consider the situation which had changed dramatically since the beginning of COVID, and also well, now, although we're kind of in the aftermath, but we never know how it will continue to develop. So we can see that not only the tourism has risen, but also that domestic tourism has really taken up in the last decade, I would say. And so there, in 2018, there were about 303 domestic arrivals, it's counted. So touristic movements, can also say, in Indonesia, in comparison to about 16 million from abroad. So that's really a big difference. And when I remember my first times in Indonesia back in the 1980s, early 1990s, I think I got the impression it was almost the opposite, that you had a lot of international tourists, or comparably many, but very few domestic tourists. So that has changed very much. So the rising Indonesian middle class certainly have discovered tourism as an attractive leisure activity, and to travel, to visit other places within the country, but also, of course, to go abroad. But here, of course, we are interested in tourism in Indonesia. And you're probably also aware of the National Tourism Development Master Plan, which was established in 2010 and should work until 2025, which is not long anymore. And in that, it was also then stipulated that 10 new Balis projects should be established. So areas in Indonesia that could be like, competitive project for Bali. But heard only recently that this has changed too, and instead of 10, I think there are only 2 or 3 now. But anyways, they just wanted to emphasize that also on the national level and regional, local level, certainly there's a great interest in developing tourism at all kinds of levels. But what interests us here most, just have to see where I am, is actually not that those big areas of tourism or the most beautiful areas, the most spectacular, that many visitors from abroad would target. But 3 areas that were affected by natural disaster or by disasters, let's say. Oh, did you see that as well? Yeah, sure. Thank you. And who then developed, at least to a certain extent, into places to be visited by people from near, but also from far, and some more, others less, and that can also be looked at or identified as places that are targets for tourists or certain kinds of tourists. And these are, first I will talk about the tsunami area or in Aceh, or the capital Banda Aceh. I will talk then about the area of Mount Merapi in Central Java. And the third one, East Java, the area that had where a mud volcano, so-called mud volcano, appeared and has affected the area until today. Yeah, there are different themes come up when talking about these issues, and also different, let's say, terms, yeah, the terminology. And one of it is what I used in my title too, is disaster tourism. But then we also have other terms that are linked to it or can be linked to it. But first, let's stay with the disaster. And as I said before, well, I've been interested mainly in so-called natural disasters. And I think there's a big difference really between disasters that were caused of mainly by natural events and natural hazards, and others human-induced, human-made disasters. So the definition of disaster, I mean, there are many definitions, but generally researchers and those working in relief operations, etc., speak of disasters of when they speak of large-scale, stressful and traumatic events that have large and tragic impact on the society, on the economic situation, political, social situation in an area, are disruptive. And also now the United Nations Center for Human Settlements speaks of a natural disaster when there is a recovery is unlikely to happen without external aid. So these different categories are important in order that we can speak of a disaster, or at least. There are also several researchers, Indonesian researchers already, who have done similar work or have worked in that area. And I just want to mention 2 who published a paper on, and also about the disaster on Mount Merapi, which I will also talk about, and on the Lapindo mud volcano. And this is Iwayan Suyatnya and Megasari Fatanti. And they mainly looked at the position and the opinions and the experiences of the tour guides and the tour operators. So that's a bit a different focus what we've had. But also, I must admit, also my students and we did not have the chance yet to look at the experiences of the tourists themselves, the people who go there. So we have disaster tourism. Disaster tourism is often linked to the term dark tourism, but because it's dark tourism generally also deals with death, with disaster, horrific situations. But there's a difference insofar as mostly we talk of dark tourism when it is human-made disasters. So what is very prominent or very well known, I think, places where the Holocaust taken place in Germany, Austria. But then also we have from Cambodia, we have from Australia, I think in Tasmania, where many people have been killed by a single person. So we have all prisons or ex-prisons that are places that can be visited. So, and this sometimes may coincide, but sometimes it's also, I would say, a bit different. And people who are in the field of disaster tourism sometimes are not too happy when it is identified as a place of dark tourism. But I also put here just to collect a bit the different terms, difficult or dark heritage, because I also have in my title term heritage, and that may perhaps sound a bit surprising, but I would say that yeah, this kind of living with a difficult nature in some ways is also part of Indonesian heritage, because it's been going on since time immemorial, can say. And so people, the local population have learned or has learned to cope with it and to live with it in many different ways. But it is certainly not something easy. And term difficult heritage very often is rather used in the museums context, for instance, what we know where in the last few years in particular, I think many discussions have taken place about collections, about also human remains that are deposited in museums, and which is seen as a kind of difficult heritage for those who run the museums, but also who demand that perhaps these objects should be given back. And the last term, heritage that hurts, I took from a book title by an American author, Joy Sadler Wagstaff, who wrote the book Heritage That Hurts, Tourists in the Memoryscapes of September 11th. So that's, of course, again, not a natural disaster, but something that's that deals with a kind of heritage, or she also sees it as a heritage for people in the United States, or at least many people there, and which is something they remember, but it is a hurtful remembering. Now let me go into the field, let's say, the examples I want to give you. And as I said, we will start with Aceh, Banda Aceh. Here, a picture of the pantai, Ule Lue. I hope I pronounce it more or less correctly. And it looks very nice, very scenic, but this is one of the areas where the tsunami hit the city, and the whole city is very flat, is very almost sea level, and the coast is very flat. So the tsunami could go, I mean, the waters very much reached inland for many kilometers, and that of course had a disastrous effect. You probably all still remember it was on Boxing Day 2004, earthquake of 9.1 magnitude in the Indian Ocean, and afterwards the big tsunami, which caused more than 130,000 casualties in Aceh alone. Now, what happened at that time? Of course, there were many houses were destroyed, many, the infrastructure, apart from the people who were wounded, who died, etc., who were killed. But there are also a couple of places, and I think the Achenese people and the local regional government then, of course, was confronted with the situation, what to do now with all those things that have been also displaced. Not only people had been displaced, but also things, and with the memories that about this very traumatic event. And I give you two examples, or three actually, which are, I think, the most outstanding ones, or the visited by most people. And two of them are ships that were thrown inland by the waves. One is the Kapalapung Lampulo, which is in the area of Lampulo. It's a district in Banda Aceh. And it is a fisher boat of 65 tons and 25 meters. So it's a middle-sized, I would say. And it was pushed onto the roof of a house, which of course it destroyed the house. Unfortunately, nobody was there. But then, and it stayed there, and people actually from the neighboring area and from the house, they could climb into the boat and take refuge there. So it was actually a safe haven during the time when the following waves still came inland. And it is a small area, but it is one of the places that is advertised also in tourist brochures and the internet, etc. And you have, as usually in Indonesia, whenever there's anything people visit, you have kiosks where you can buy food and drink, and you can buy T-shirts, etc. that commemorate that event. What is special here, I would say, is that you have the local population, and I have to do it here, yeah, who have been affected themselves, and they it looks like they run the business, since that they work there, they sell the tickets to go there, but also they are very eager to share their stories. So it is not that you just go in and you look at the information tables and at the photos. There are photos taken, and you have a small exhibition here in the boat. I mean, you can climb up, and then you have the exhibition. But you have the ladies, and when I was there were only women who explain, who tell you how it was and where they had been at the time, etc. And here you can see, for instance, also school classes and young people, local people go there and get the information, and also a bit get instructions what was good to do or what should be done in case of a tsunami. But of course, you also have international tourists and national, I would say in Aceh, you have a lot of tourists from other areas in Aceh itself and from Sumatra and Jakarta, of course, but then also many tourists from Singapore, Malaysia, so the neighboring countries. And Aceh itself is not, I would compare to some other places in Indonesia, like Java or Bali, is not or hasn't become such an important or such a tourist destination yet. So it is still rather small scale tourism. So, but you can also, I think Indonesian people often are wonderful in making money out of almost anything. And so you have the bumbu, so the spices that you can buy, and you have the photo with the that boat, that ship, you know, so I have the Kapal Tsunami. The other example I mentioned before is a much bigger ship of 2,600 tons. I mean, it's huge. It's a ship which was used as an electric generator before. It was the coast also of Aceh, and supplied the local population or the area with electricity. And it was also, how would you say, pushed inland several kilometers, which is just amazing when you're there and you see how big it is. And now it is really, yeah, it also destroyed several houses, but not too many. And now you can also go inside and you have exhibitions. It's a bit stuffy, it's a bit dark, it's not so easy to see, but nonetheless, it is interesting. And then outside you have a a good view, beautiful view over the whole area. And you can take photos, which many people do, etc. And the next one, as I said before, and this is a bit different from the others, is the Tsunami Museum. And the Tsunami Museum is different already because it was specifically built after the tsunami, and also to commemorate, but also to instruct people what to do in case of another tsunami. And it was built by an architect, the name I have here, Radwan Kamil, I think, if I can read it well, who then became governor of West Java. So he's also a politician. And it was built in a very unique way, very unique shape. So it should actually take on the shape of a tsunami. The roof should be like the shape of a tsunami. The bottom area, rather like an Achenese house or a traditional Achenese house. There are several exhibitions. It's very large. It's 4 stories. And you can see, of course, lots of pictures and texts, can read texts about the tsunami itself, about tsunamis generally, about natural disasters, but then also about the lives of the people who had been victims and those who were survivors. And so it fulfills quite a number of needs, I would say. So on the one hand, it is a commemoration of the people, the victims, but then also a celebration of Achenese resilience, of their way of overcoming the difficulties. The Achenese house, the traditional house, it is said that it could withstand the tsunami or earthquakes, etc., much better than many modern buildings. So it is that celebration of tradition as well. And it should act also as a place of refuge, because it got several stories. It got a refuge area for people, where people could gather in case there is another event similar like that one. So that's also, I would say, very impressive, interesting. It was at the time of my visit in 2019. Unfortunately, there was not much water. There's only a little bit of water here, but it was not as much as normally, I was told. So I did not get the same effect, I think. But it is said that the visitors should also get the impression almost like being in a tsunami, which I thought was very interesting in some ways, because you would think that, do the people really want that? I mean, perhaps the international or national visitors who hadn't gone through it would like to have it, because it's a bit like riding, if you go to Luna Park or whatever. But for the local population who had been through it, when it is so traumatic, do you want to relive it? Not, but so I thought it was an interesting aspect, but equally interesting, and I think certainly important, is really the emphasis also from the people who run the museum, and we talked to the director there, really on the educational aspect. Say, well, we want to have school classes, we want to have the local population to come here, and also to teach them how to recognize a tsunami, how to know about it, and to know what to do with it. And so in Aceh, I would say that although you have the touristic aspect, and it's interesting because if you go to any website about what to do in Aceh, in Banda Aceh, tourism, you will have these 3 sites. But at the same time, the authorities themselves, even from the tourism agency or the regional office for tourism, they said, well, it's not tsunami tourism, it's not disaster tourism, because the tourists who come here, they don't go through the disaster, but it is part of our history, it's part of our heritage. So that's something people have to see, have to learn, and in order to understand us. So I thought that's an interesting aspect. Yeah, here again, that's more or less the same. Yeah. Yeah, perhaps also the last point here, saying that it was recognized of local people, but also those who are working in either at university or in different agencies dealing with disaster, with the tsunami, etc., say that actually these people have forgotten already how it is to be in a tsunami, and there were so many casualties because the people did not recognize it in time. Whereas in the neighboring island of Simeulue, yeah, Simeulue, you have the term of a special term called smong, and so apparently not only the adults but also the children get taught and yeah, how to recognize it and what to do. Although now one of these Indonesian students I worked with, she went to that island and did a bit of research about the knowledge there, and what she found out is also disappearing. So I think this is one of the points, I would say, also in difference between human-made disasters and natural disasters, that until not that long ago, I think it was not normal to have sites of natural disasters being marketed or as sites for visitors. But it's mainly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the impression I got and what I've been reading, that people mainly try to forget as quickly as possible and get back to a normal life, to rebuild, etc., which is good in many ways, I think. But it also has the problem that then the experience is lost and the knowledge gets lost. So even in other places where I did research in that field, whatever happened more than 1-2 generations ago, people would not remember, would not know, would say, oh, this has never been, here before, it's never been as bad. And if you look at historic sources, you see, oh, well, it's always been, but only perhaps outside or beyond people's memories. This one. Yeah, next example is Merapi, north of the city of Yogyakarta, in the center of the island of Java, which I think know all of you probably. And it's a very high volcano, almost 3,000 meters high. And the last big eruption happened in 2010 in October, November. I mean, there were eruptions afterwards too, but not as remarkable. Did not cause so much damage. After this eruption, with many people, I mean, the idea was that everybody should, from the hazardous zone, should be evacuated in time, and so that there shouldn't be any casualties. It did not quite work out because not everybody really could or wanted to leave in time. And so, but it was a relatively low number certainly compared to tsunami, but also compared to many other disasters in the area. But here is just a picture where you can see the different zones that were drawn afterwards. And you can see this is a very dangerous zone, of course, near the summit of Gunung Merapi. And the further away you go, the less dangerous it becomes. But we had villages right up here, and they should be not only they've been evacuated at the time, but also people should not move back, which did not happen. I mean, it happened that actually many people then, after some time, moved back to the areas. So it is still quite dangerous, I would say. But yeah, on the Merapi, because being high mountain near a big city, so it also, and with a quite pleasant climate, bit up on the hills, it has been a place for tourists or for local tourists, local visitors for a long time. And you find many forms of tourism on the Merapi, not only the disaster tourism, which today perhaps is the most prominent one, but already during colonial times, it was a place where people would go, I guess, those who could afford it and who had the possibilities and could enjoy the area as a place of recreation. But then we also have, yes, I have the recreation in Kaliurang, but then also agro-tourism nowadays with ecologically grown fruits and you have goats, etc. that and people can buy the products. You have a museum Gunung Merapi now, which also has this kind of more educational aspect in the foreground, but also art museums, etc. But what interests us here now mainly is the so-called lava tour, which is a tour which you can book. I mean, you can also go with your own motorbike, but many people who don't have it, I mean, with normal car, I would not recommend that you book a jeep, usually several people, and you go to different places that show you the areas where the lava came down, but then also other sites of interest. So at the time in 2018, there were about 30 so-called jeep communities with a number of approximately 700 jeeps at the time, which is enormous in my view, and you could also, you could also see the effects. I mean, on a busy day, it was very busy, very noisy, etc. And I thought, oh dear, what happened to these, in my view, peaceful villages once upon a time, where you have the fumes, you have the cars going everywhere, etc. And you have, as I said, you have a different program. It's very well organized. You have a program with, you can get the extensive version where you do the river crossing and you get Stonehenge, etc. Or you have a shorter one, and depending on the version, of course, you have different prices. And book the whole car is not very cheap, but if you do it 4 to 6 people, then it's manageable, I would say. And you have, I think, many people, I guess in the beginning, there would have been more locals, but now you have many visitors from other parts of Indonesia, I think mainly Jakarta or Jakarta area, and then Malaysia, etc. So I saw, and I've been there now a few times, so only one other European, so which is, I mean, physically recognizable as a European or Westerner or whatever you want, or perhaps Australian, but all the other visitors were Asian. And I think that's also interesting. So it is very much targeting also, I think, that kind of market. And perhaps Western visitors don't get the information or think, no, that's not something they want to do. But it has become really I think also for many local people, probably something that you show your guests, because a colleague of mine Gajah Mada University also, she had a visitor from an Austrian student, and she showed me, then they went there and did the lava tour. So it's something you don't only do Borobudur nowadays, but this is also something interesting and well worth visit and fun. I mean, this is a bit less fun because this is a few pictures just from the area where the sand mining is being done. And you see that in the past, many people there were kind of just small-scale farmers who one of their main produce was food for the cattle. Yeah, but show you some of the sites that can be visited. And these first two sites, where they don't really refer to the disaster itself, but it is in the area and it can be visited when you pay a little bit of money also at the entrance. And one is so-called Stonehenge, which is of course an imitation, and especially certain effects, the way how you take photos, etc. So it is mainly a site for taking pictures. The second one, the Lost World Castle, is a similar in the sense that it lends itself for taking special photos. It is a bit a mixture of Wild West and Disneyland, etc. So to have fun. And perhaps, if you're just married, you can then have a picture here, or if you want to. What is more linked to the disaster, or directly linked to the disaster, certainly the next few ones. And one that everybody visits then is the so-called Batu Alien, which is here. It's a rock which has a bit the face of a person and a set of an alien. And the story goes that the rock was not there before the eruption, but it must have rolled down, must have come down, and perhaps then covered with the ashes, etc. So this is something a bit mystical in some ways. But you can climb up, not on the rock, but on some scaffolds, and also it's good for taking pictures. The next place is the Bunker Kaliadem, which here you can see how many jeeps are there at the time, but which is a bit of a gruesome place, very much so, because it was built, and there are different kinds of information. It was built to protect people from such events like volcanic eruption or earthquakes, and so there's a shelter, but it didn't prove that it was not suitable, because two men took refuge, and they burned alive, you can say, because it was all covered in the ashes, in the hot ashes, and this was like an oven. So it is really not a very nice place and not very nice memories. Nonetheless, you have a lot of people going there, groups of colleagues from offices or students, school classes, etc. And it certainly is one of the major attractions. That's why you have lots of warungs, lots of places where you can eat, drink, buy these T-shirts with the photos, etc. Another one is, and this is, I guess, one of the few last ones, Petilasan Bamarijan. Bamarijan, he was the spiritual god of Gunung Merapi, and he was also one of those people who refused to evacuate, saying, well, this is my duty to be here and stay here, and having this special relationship with the mountain and spirits in the mountain. And his home, his previous home, and so he unfortunately died also, together with two journalists who stayed with him. And the area where the house was before, and many of the things that had been recovered are now on display, and also pictures of Bamarijan here, and the journalists, etc. but also many pictures of how it happened, what happened, etc. This is Marijan's son who had taken over this duty now, and here his wife and daughter. They left and in time. Yeah, so it becomes a place of worship, a place of memory. So, and yeah, quite diverse. What is interesting, just because of course the touristic aspect is here in the focus, that already within a short time, I think these women, they were all women from the local population, organized themselves and followed these jeeps with cameras, and so that the people who are in the jeeps and standing there and waving and cheering, they get photos taken, and then they rush back. There's a lot of little computers and printers, and they process the photos. And when the tourists come back, they can get their photos and can buy the photo. So I think it's a very genial idea of also making a bit of money in these difficult times, because certainly people did not get really rich with it. And a bit similar to the Petilasan, there are also two so-called museums, which were private initiatives as well. And these are all private initiatives, basically, that also somebody who lived in that house, and there was a whole complex of these traditional Javanese houses. And soon after, what's the year after, 2011, already made a museum out of it, and saying that, this is kind of also a way to memorialize the event, but also to show other people what happened. And I would say also to have a bit of an income. And but also, taking this idea of a museum to this place, so a museum not only something where you collect beautiful things, or you collect things of art or from the past, but also something that's happening now. And you see, all these objects of daily life, how they've been destroyed, but still been collected and preserved in this kind of thing. But it's also a place where people like to take pictures, etc. Here you have a model of the old house. Yeah, so the second gallery, they call themselves now not museum, but gallery, is the Gallery Omaku Memoriku. So my house, my memory. And it's a bit similar, but only it opened 2 years later. So they have been in competition, the two museums. And the lava tour, they go either or to one or the other. And so it depends probably who pays more to the drivers, where they go in the end. But yeah, it is very impressive, I would say. So you see him also the clock it stops at the time of the eruption, and it's melted or half melted. And then pictures of the destruction of victims, etc. And the last example now is the Lapindo mud volcano, Sidoarjo. Sidoarjo is in East Java. There's a population of more than 2 million, several kecamatan, and it was an industrial area, but also agricultural area. And probably what was most important also back then, and certainly now, is that oil and gas reserves in the ground, and there was heavy extraction, or very intensive extraction of these reserves, which eventually led to a fatal accident, or which is, well, if we believe the majority of voices say that the company, Lapindo company, that had been drilling, did not take the necessary precautions, which had been more time and resource consuming, and therefore, didn't take the precautions and hit this underground mud sea, perhaps, you know, or mud volcano, which covers actually large parts in East Java. And so this mud eventually, or very quickly, I think, came out and has been since then. It is still coming out of the ground, although not as fast as it used to be. And yeah, had been flooded 19 of the villages, 40,000 houses, etc. And yeah, you don't see, I mean, here just these pictures are from the internet, admittedly, because I wasn't there at that time. But these are pictures I took then, and you can see that it's like a moon landscape, you can say. And the local government tried to get some of the mud out and into the river, you know, or the water, which in the nearby river, not such a good idea. I think not only I say it, but also ecologists, because of course it kills the fish in the area. And yeah, here you can see it. And it's very, very smelly. I thought, well, I don't know how people really can live in the area, even those who are relocated, even in those areas, it is not very nice. So, but so many people, they don't have really regular income, or not enough, at least. And especially the men, but also some, yeah, at least I knew one woman tried to attract tourists going to that big lake now, or what you, on the Calder, you can go around by motorbike and show them the sites, explain them what was there before, where was the mosque, where was the school, etc. Interestingly, yeah, there were apparently, that's what I heard, a lot of tourists in the beginning, because there was in 2006, and even in Europe we heard of it, I think, to remember. And so many people from different parts of Java or Indonesia came and wanted to see it. And so it was seen as something, well, that's quite, yeah, a possibility also to make business. Of course, that interest has died down over the years. And nowadays, I mean, when you go there now, it may be that the whole day, there are a couple of tourists perhaps stopping and not even perhaps taking the tour, but just having a quick look, taking some photos. So it is certainly not something and what comes with it is that question of guilt and of blame in the sense. And because of that, because some of these years you want to remember in war, whereas the earthquake, there's no left in that. And I found it actually quite surprising that Indonesian people there seem to have a very the attitude attitude towards the mountain. It's not one of the blaming or saying, oh yeah, this terrible mountain is tree. But this is, yeah, the mountain gives and the mountain takes. So it is something that happens all the time. Yeah, it's also, I think it's and just want to see so that I don't get something important. Yeah, in all three cases, we could see a certain commodification, whereas most of, I mean, the strongest one certainly is the lava tour with the Gunung Merapi. As I said, the aspect of education is stronger in Aceh and in Lapindo. Yeah, they would like to send it more, but it's just not possible. It's not such a demand. And also, what I found interesting is, and I would say, yeah, perhaps because you have that question of field and compensation that should be paid and had not been paid enough, etc., that there's a certain, I would say, paralysis that the people that I mean, if I compare with Merapi, where the people got up and said, oh, we buy the jeeps, we do this, we do that, you know. Whereas in the Lapindo case, it's mainly waiting. We wait that we get this, we wait that this is solved for us. And that was already 12 years ago. And the young people, you know, they grew up with it. And it is a bit hopelessness, I would say. That so there may be, yeah, in detail, of course, there are many differences. But I think it's that general underlying, yeah, what is a sentiment or, yeah, remembering is important in all the three cases, remembering the suffering, the victims, but then also, especially in the case of Aceh, we have the hope that something better may come out of it, and that, yeah, that the places that were places of disaster turned into places of remembrance, in places or sites of visit, etc. And also objects have become important, not only memories or texts are then shown, but always, you know, things, collecting things and showing things that are proofs that it happened and what happened. So as I said in the beginning, a disaster as heritage is something which, or an aspect which I think is also prominent here, because it is something that people in these areas certainly not only have gone through, but also in previous generations have lived through similar or perhaps other kind of disasters, but certainly through disasters. And my last slide is just a bit of reflection again on, yeah, responses to calamities and loss generally, because interestingly, when I talk to my European colleagues or students, and many of them are shocked that people go to places where such terrible things have happened. I mean, we go to the Holocaust, to the memorials, etc., but to natural disaster, because the idea is, yeah, everything should be cleaned up, and then yeah, perhaps, yeah, donate money, etc., but not to this voyeuristic aspect. Yeah? And as I said, also, I did not see, well, in Aceh certainly there are not many Western tourists. In Yogyakarta there are many more, but I did not see or hardly saw anyone visiting these places. So there's this more rejection in a certain way, which I did not find among the Indonesian or Asian visitors, at least, you know. And I think it has to do also with a different attitude towards death and calamities, let's say. And here I just showed, because it's from a Facebook of a colleague and friend of mine, but since there are thousands of followers, so I think it's okay if I to show it here, because it's not very private. And that was when her husband died, and you had a lot of reactions, and
those, of course, you're all familiar with the situation in Indonesia, and I'm also linked on Facebook with many friends, and it is quite normal that you put the photo of a deceased person up on Facebook, not only when he was still alive, but also once the person has died. And something that in Europe now, people are horrified when I tell them, you know. So it is, I think, this different attitude, which we also have to consider and say, oh, how can people go and look at these houses? Yeah, it is. It may be voyeuristic, but it also has the effect of sharing. And one of those who runs the gallery, Omaku Memoriku, he said, well, it is a way to overcome because you talk about it all the time. And it's almost, it has a therapeutic effect. And I think, I mean, when you go to a psychotherapist, that's what you do, you talk about it. And so I will leave you with this, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for a very interesting presentation. So let's now take question and answers. We'll start with Mira. Can you speak up? Yeah.
So from my experience, well, is a commodified local government. So my question is to people find that this kind of anxiety even contribute something to the tourism.
You mean the aspect of Islam? Yeah.
Like for those
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Or like
Yeah. I think I agree that it's probably one of the reasons why not so many people from outside, yet even Indonesia and other parts of Java, go to Aceh or haven't gone yet. I don't know how it was before the tsunami, because what I learned is that situation has changed very much, you know, also with the peace agreement, etc. But my experience was, and before I went there, also some of my Indonesian colleagues said, "Oh, you're sure you want to go there? You know, Western woman, you know, etc." But I had a very, very good experience, and I mean, I found people very open, very welcoming, no problem whatsoever. So, and also from the tourist board, then. Yeah, people said, "Oh, you should tell that," you know, because obviously there is a desire and need, you know, to attract more people. But I agree. I think perhaps Aceh still has a bit of a stigma in that sense, you know. I think, oh, that's a place where difficult, perhaps.
Thank you, Greg. And then we take one from online audience. So.
I just wanted to ask if you could make a typology of different kinds of disaster sites. So, and particularly Porong stood out to me. I mean, a lot of, in one way, it's a natural disaster. In another way, it was an engineering disaster by Batu Company. And so that's different from Merapi and Tsunami. And so there's a strong element of human intervention here, and also the issue about the failure to pay due compensation, the fact that village of Porong, I think it was, you know, was completely deprived, you had to relocate, deprived of their livelihoods of people in the village and the like. So there is a very strong social injustice to what's happening in Porong. And I wonder if that's because you were referring to Merapi, that the victims were able to have enough money to buy the cheese and the like. So they could share in taking some benefit from the disaster tourism, but in Lapindo, that's not been the case at all. Local para leads to deprive those people of what really should be the just reserves following that. So I'm wondering if when you're analysing this and putting these sort of cases together, you can say these kinds of disaster tourism cases actually are a much sadder story because it's going on for generations.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and I try to explain a bit along these lines. Yeah, that one thing is that you have somebody who you see responsible for it, and who probably is responsible at least to a certain extent, for what had happened, and who hadn't really met the expectations then from the side of the victims, and with agreements, etc. Yeah, so there are still many people, and I know also people in NGOs, etc., and on site who are still fighting for this compensation, and it's dreadful when you think after so many years, and so I certainly, I fully agree, with what you said, and the whole situation. I think it was, for me, there was a very depressing environment, where you think not so much that you think people are extremely poor, because some of the houses, they're new, they look better perhaps than in some other areas, but it is that feeling of hopelessness, in a kind of waiting that something will happen, better will happen, that they get the money, they get aid, or that more industry will be built up again, which hadn't happened enough. At least many people are out of job. So it is very different. And it is a mixture. I mean, it is a natural disaster that was caused by humans. Huh? And
So let's now take maybe a couple of questions from online audience.
Okay, yeah, sure. Just to let you know that more than 20 people are online.
oh wow, good. Very
From
good.
Mini Anzel, she is asking how to use the rise of disaster tourism as a stepping stone, similarly recognize the dark disaster of 1965, where communist witch hunt has been suppressed, the memory, etc. But we know models could be found in Cambodia and the US, where a museum that is about openness and regret rather than denial and suppression.
Yeah, well, I think the 65 situation, or what happened then, is a very good Indonesian example of human-made disasters, where, because the idea of memory and memorization is perhaps, is more in the foreground even, but of course, which is more controversial. And as your colleague mentioned, Cambodia, and I guess, that would be, it's a bit, or I don't know if you can say similar, but something, I think a problem really in Indonesia is that you have the kind of the victims and perpetrators, they're all together. I mean, it's different if you have a war memorial where you say, the enemies are the outsiders, but it's always the problem of like a civil war, where you have the same. And I think there is a need, certainly is a need among the generation people of the younger generation, to come up with it, and not longer to be silent or not solve the issue. But I can't really say how it should be done and what should or could be done. But it is a very different category, I'd say, from what happened here, and also even from the Lapindo case, which was not done intentionally, of course. The Lapindo company did not have the intention now to harm all these people.
Maybe one more from online, and then we go to the link.
Okay. Okamoto, which is Associate Lecturer in Tourism and Events at Merapi University. Thank you for a wonderful and informative presentation. Wondering whether disaster tourism is featured in the national or regional tourism strategy in Indonesia. In other words, if disaster tourism is actively promoted by the TMO, the general government, why and why not?
Well, I have not come across it, I don't think it's in the big master plan, where they just want to show, of course, beautiful sights and sceneries of Indonesia, mainly sceneries in the landscape. And actually, I mean, before, in the Aceh case, I think the government's, or at least the official voices, they are not so much on tourism now when it comes to these disaster places, but much more saying, oh, this should be for our people, so that they have a place where to go or to inform themselves, etc. And so it is at least not that voyeuristic aspect so much in the foreground. In the Merapi case, you do have that because the locals, they already know it, they don't go, they don't pay so much money to visit. And but I got different information how much the government actually has agreed to it. I think it is something they just keep quiet about it because the people have made some money and they were happy, and so they didn't have then to look after them more, but it's actually some of these sites, or I think most of the sites actually in the so-called red zone, they should not, nothing permanent should be built there. And for instance, we have this Lost World Castle and the Stonehenge, and that was built by somebody from Jakarta, somebody, it's not really clear who, an investor who built it, who probably also has good connections to the local government, and so it is, but it's not something that
What about the museum, Gabriel, the Ridwan Kamil Museum?
The Gunung Merapi Museum.
No,
No.
the tsunami.
Oh, the tsunami, yeah, the Tsunami Museum. Yeah, that's very much, that's in the government brochures, etc. Yeah, and also the two kappa, the ships. Right. That is advertised, and it's something like, like the mosque, big mosque, etc. It's in, and certainly, I think in the Aceh case, it is probably also is a way to attract more visitors, because as we heard from the colleague that not so many people have gone to Aceh yet to visit Banda Aceh, and to have a few more sites, but it is a very different quality, I would say, to what happens in the Merapi, where it is mainly the adventure, and now we show you this. I wonder when we don't see any more lava, if it's still called lava tour, because as you know, it grows, the plants grow quickly, and perhaps don't have that in, and certainly in the Lapindo, but actually in the Lapindo case, I saw the year before in 2017, so big sign on the street from the local government. Oh yeah, tempat wisata, so tourist place, Lapindo. And actually their idea, of building some tourism resort in the area, which I don't know who will go, I mean, pay a lot of money. I mean, you go and have a look once, and that's for half an hour, but not long. It's not really an area where it's very pleasant, spend a lot of time. So you have perhaps, the local government still saw it or sees it as a way, to create some income or to attract visitors, but I don't think it will be successful.
Yeah, thanks, Gabrielle, for your presentation. This actually flows on from what you're just talking about in terms of the economic impacts, but also the idea of commemoration.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm really interested in this because when we look at tourism studies, there's a lot of critique of disaster tourism from a commemoration perspective. You know, it's insensitive, it's inappropriate to be doing things like lava tours, to be, you know, you see people taking selfies at the Holocaust Museum and things like this. But I'm wondering, when you mentioned that issue with the lava tours in particular, and you see this as, you know, people are making money from this, whatever way they can, in communities that have been devastated, there's an economic opportunity there for sure. But I wonder whether there's this idea that a Western sensitivity, looking at this in tourism studies, in the literature that's around this, sees this as inappropriate, sees this as insensitive, but from a local moment, there's a local opportunity for economic gain. Is this always incongruent? You know, is there always a kind of a disconnect between this is insensitive, oh, but there's an opportunity here economically? What about the idea that if you take away the economics of it, is it perhaps actually a local way, as you said before, commemorating? Is it not just about the economics? So is it perhaps, it's not just about insensitivity, but there's a sense of commemoration that's happening here as well? And I wonder if you can talk more about that from not just the lava tours, but other examples as well, because I don't think that Indonesians would necessarily look at this and just say, well, this is just economic opportunity. I think perhaps there's commemoration happening here as well. But then plenty, and as you just said then, with the reflection of Indonesia's tourism, you know, we're not seeing the lava tour or Lapindo as part of the wonderful Indonesia or the 10 new Bali. So I don't think it's quite reached the mainstream as being part of tourism yet. But what's going on here? Is it more than just economic opportunity?
No, I fully agree with you, you know, and perhaps that's why I didn't stress, or at least didn't try to stress, the economic aspect more than any other aspect, you know. Certainly the commemorative aspect is very big, you know. And again, what you said, that it's the critique very much comes actually from Western intellectuals or writers, you know, who emphasize perhaps the insensitivity of these undertakings. But yeah, that's why I quoted the gallery owner, who then said, oh, well, actually for me, it was like a way to overcome also these traumas. And I also talked to the other museum, you know, the guy who not only runs it, but owns it, you know, the family. And I did not, I don't think, you know, they, as I said, they don't become rich just with these undertakings, but it is a resource in a way. And at the same time, something, I think people in Indonesia generally have been more aware of the functions of museums, which when I was in Indonesia first time in 1980s, you know, nobody would go to a museum, but now I think the institution of a museum and a gallery, etc., become well known, and also people frequent it, much more. So I think this idea of something that's valuable for whatever reasons can and should be also have a place in such institutions or newly created ones, and there are new forms of creativity also, I would say, you know. But certainly, commemoration is very important.
Online,
There's one question from Anton Novenanto.
Ah, yeah, I know him.
In the cases of Marflo and tsunami, the dates of the disasters are quite fixed in comparison to the Merapi case, of which eruptions are more frequent to happen. How is the concept of time working differently in the making of the memorial sites and disaster commemoration of
No, it's good question. Because Anton Nino, he worked himself, he did his PhD on the Lapindo case, you know, in what was it, Heidelberg, University of Heidelberg. Interesting, because here too you have like a how do you say, on the scale, you know, you have it's very clear the tsunami in Aceh, you know, when it happened. Then the Merapi eruption, of course, that happened over a period of several weeks, you know. And then in the case of Lapindo, it is still going on, you know. Of course, there was a day zero, or when it all started, but it hasn't finished yet, you know, also. And so, yeah, I mean, what influence does it have on the way how people have been dealing with it? Well, certainly this is another aspect, probably with Lapindo, that you can't say, now it's finished and we clean up. I mean, first of all, of course, it would be too difficult, I guess, but even so, since it hasn't totally stopped yet, and the pollution and the environmental disaster goes on and will maybe becoming even bigger still. Whereas, yeah, with the Merapi, it is the cyclical problem. You could say that every few years you have an eruption, and also the problem of what I thought, what would happen if there's another big one, what happens to all these places then, yeah? And that means there've been investment, and a lot of investment, you know, the people gave up their previous livelihoods, etc. And yeah, what if it can't go on? But I think it certainly they were very much hit by the COVID crisis, huh? When for quite some time, yeah, nobody could visit. Huh? And apparently it has taken on again, and the visitors again. But I assume that, yeah, but I also heard that several of the places of there, because there have been cafes and etc., you know, different places opened up, and some had closed and others, new ones opened again, like also in other places, of course, you know, but certainly just focusing on a very specific type of tourism, I think it's quite vulnerable too, you know.
Any other questions from the room? Online? Thanks. Oh yeah.
So I want to make these various examples that you gave. It's some very amateurish, some like the Aceh is very professional, I would guess. So do you see a type of profession growing that is specializing in disaster tourism, for example, or it's not disaster, but actually I think commemoration type of tourism?
I don't know, honestly, you know. Just thinking now beyond Indonesia, you know. So I think there are certain, yeah, agents, now tourism agents, you know. I can't say if there are any based in Indonesia, but just internationally, that offer tours, yeah, to places, maybe war zones, maybe places where terrible things have happened, you know, and to satisfy perhaps, you know, the need for excitement of people who think they have seen everything or want, you know. So I think there's specific programs, can say, you know, for that. But I don't know if in Indonesia you have something like that, you know. I don't really think yet. And yeah.
We still have 3 minutes.
Well, we can also finish earlier, I guess.
Alex, yeah.
With some of the sort of for-profit tourist developments that you found in different areas, were you able to find out who owned them and who was able to sort of make a living from them? And if it was the case that those people were sort of wealthy people from outside communities, did you ever encounter any tension between the local communities and the outside communities?
Yeah, well, I think with the Merapi case, you have the jeeps, they are owned by the locals, but that's also interesting because when we got the information that it started soon after the eruption, and the idea was just to give like relief, you know, to some people, and each household only allowed to have one jeep, you know, and you have these so-called jeep communities and only limited. And then it just exploded And in the house I stayed once, for a little while, and they had 5 jeeps, there. I'm not sure, who owned exactly which one, because I think ownership is often one of the most delicate subjects not only in Indonesia, but even who owns what and who earns what, But certainly, yeah, I think the 2 places which definitely owned by foreign investors, the Stonehenge and Lost World Castle. So I think they're looked at critically at least by some of the local people, and saying, "Oh, we don't know who this is and what, why they built it there, and I'm not interested in visiting, etc." So I think there's a difference that whereas it would be seen quite positive that people visit the museums, the petilasan, and these places,
Let me ask the final question,
Oh, yes.
Gabriel. So, you have another question? So my question is commodification versus commemoration. Which one is more significant in driving disaster tourism?
Well, I think yeah. I mean, I know we always, and me too, want to find answers, simple answers in a way, but so often the answer is more complex. I think it depends on the place, depends on the people.
Right.
I mean, for some people, it would be the memory aspect. For us, others would be just easy way perhaps to make money, So I think you have it both, and sometimes in conflict, sometimes in harmony with each other. And so I can't decide. Sorry.
Okay, with that, please join me in thanking Dr. Waker. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And participants also. Again, have final word. Okay. So thank you again, Gabriel.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting and for listening. So bye also to the unknown ones.